NSFW, judges of Reddit, what are some of the weirdest cases you've seen? Studied forensics. And a defense lawyer told me this story. He is called to defend a client who accused of robbing a garage in a nearby city. Police found his fingerprints in a Coke machine. Yes. In a Coke machine. As in the disassembled and vending machine, and dusted it. And found a print on an internal component. Oh. Here's the catch. The suspect was currently serving a prison sentence at the time of the crime. So this was the prosecutor's theory. Suspect had broken out of jail. Drove 2 hours to that garage. Burglarized it. Opened up the Coke machine. Left his fingerprint inside it and nowhere else. Reassembled it. Drove back 2 hours. And snuck back in jail. Surprisingly, this case didn't get tossed out laughing and actually went to court. The good news for the suspect is that his lawyer discovered that before his incarceration he happened to work for the business that maintained the Coke machine. So he was trying to explain the fingerprint by saying it could have been left there when the suspect performed maintenance. He hired a fingerprint expert, who was able to demonstrate that police used the wrong method for lifting a print. Not a judge, but a reporter who covers courts. The weirdest case I covered was a man getting caught giving a hand job to a pit bull. It wasn't Azul. He wanted the dog to impregnate his dog. But the male pit bull's owner refused. So the man broke in and got caught collecting semen. The guy was charged with bestiality. His lawyer argued that charge had to have an element of Azul pleasure for the defendant. He said his client should have been charged with theft of biological material. Not a judge. But in the US Navy I was a legal officer on a ship. My captain has the ability to administer punishment for violating military law. We had a sailor who broke the law, and after the captain found him guilty, the sailor said he would jump overboard. No one took him seriously, and sure enough, he went out to the weather deck and jumped right in the ocean. We had to recover him with one of our small boats, and he threatened to do it again. And did do it again a week later. I was in court once. Next up. Behind a guy on trial for a slew of charges around child abuse and RP. The dude told the judge if she's not of age to consent, how can her testimony be valid? Judge proceeded to unload on this man and give him a chance to speak before she handed down a sentence. Dude said word for word, "How are you going to treat her like an adult and me a criminal when I'm the one facing charges?" Full stop. She proceeded to him up and he got like 20 life, and I was next. Myself before I even stood up. I'm not a judge. But a legal case involving alleged identical twins once landed on my desk. It somehow hinged on whether or not they were identical or just fraternal twins. They had an identical set of CODIS results. One party claimed that proved they were twins. The other party argued that all it demonstrated was that they were not excluded from being identical twins. So they might not actually be identical. Apparently that was worth paying me reasonable amounts of money to demonstrate. Mathematically. That if two siblings share 15 CODIS markers, they are identical twins with a certainty of 99% rather than just being fraternal, or just siblings. I have no idea what that case was about or why that was such a controversial piece of evidence. Also not a judge. But I work with a psychologist who does some work in mental hospitals and has to testify as to whether they should or should not be released. Court is over the phone right now because of COVID. So I was privy to the little exchange. My boss's patient is schizophrenic and was refusing his medication. My boss was testifying as to why he shouldn't be released, violent to his family, active psychosis. Much to the patient's displeasure. The patient starts yelling, "Man, I wanna get out of here. It's so nasty. They got snakes in here." The judge replied, "Sir, the quickest way to get released is to comply with your medication. And the medication will also help you with your snake problem." Not a judge. My father worked court services as a police officer and came home and told me about the case. We had a few very rural areas around where I lived. The case was brought because the daughter had reported to a friend that her dad and two brothers had taken her out to the woods and had sex with her. While the judge was trying to explain to the father why this is wrong, he replied, well, how else is she supposed to learn? From a stranger? Semicolon. I don't think I have ever seen my father drink as much as he did that night. Semicolon. Edit. I did not realize this would be commented on so much. This happened in Canada, not the US. I realize that I said the dad and brothers had sex with the poor girl, but I do understand that this actually was pay of a family member. I have a lot of very horrifying things from my dad about what he saw while on duty, and I have no idea how he dealt with it as well as he did. Worked in LE for a long while. Escorted an inmate to court for his dismemberment and murder charges trial. He chose to represent himself. Context. Was infatuated with Charles Manson and cults. Started one that preyed on mentally unstable handicapped women and killed them if they tried to leave. This poor girl with autism wanted to go home. He killed her with his followers' help. Chopped her up. And burned the pieces in a dumpster. His opening statement was something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen of the court, I just want to clarify that things being inserted into my butt are going to come up in this trial. I'm not gay. I just liked it. The judge said what the? But caught himself before dropping the F-bomb. Everyone in the courtroom laughed at him. It was thrown out and he went for mental health screenings. I don't miss LE work. At all. I did accrue a load of stories though. The old no homo defense. A simple but effective spell. I was a mediator in small claims court in Queens, NY during law school. Mediators attempt to help the parties reach a settlement. A woman brought a claim against a shoe store. According to her, there was a display with shoes for $20. And she got to the register with 2 pairs of shoes. They charged her $25 per pair. She complained and told the counterperson that they were on sale for $20. She brought the counterperson to the display and, according to the woman, they had switched the sign so that it now said $25. She paid the $50 and then sued for the $10 extra that she had to pay. The cost for filing the claim was $15. After she told me her story, I met with the 2 lower level employees that the shoe store had sent to the court. They of course denied changing the sign. But I told them they can settle for $10 and leave immediately, or they would have to wait for a judge to decide the case. They happily paid the $10. The woman lost $5 in the transaction. Not a judge. But my mom had to go to court once because our dog caught and ate a rabbit. We were charged with endangering wildlife. When the case was called, judge laughed and threw the charges out. My dad had a court appearance because of noise complaints due to our dog barking. Judge asked my dad how he pleaded. Not guilty, Your Honor. J. And why is that? D. I wasn't the one barking, Your Honor. After a handful of laughs from the courtroom, judge dismissed the case. Edit. My first award. Thank you, kind stranger. Another one? I'm all giddy. Not a judge. Brother-in-law was clerk of the court for most of a decade. Dude comes in with an indecent exposure charge. He was walking around the local Target in super shorty shorts. And his lil shorty was longer than the shorts. Okay. This is supposedly fairly straightforward, slap on the wrist and get told to buy longer shorts. Except it turns out this isn't this guy's first rodeo. In fact, it's his 25th rodeo. Dude is an exhibitionist. And this was his MO. He was already banned from all retail establishments in half the counties in the state. And a handful of counties in the neighboring states. At this point he'd had so many convictions that he was looking at 25 to life for an indecent exposure. Oddly enough, there was another indecent exposure case involving the other local Target a week later. Dude was standing up in the open bed of his pickup at 2 a.m. cranking it in the Target parking lot. Plaintiff filed suit in small claims court because the defendant did not perform the SZOL acts that plaintiff paid the defendant for. It ended up settling in mediation, which was good for the plaintiff because it would have had to be reported for potential criminal charges if it made to court. Not a judge. But I was on jury duty. Had to sit on a hearing. The man was begging for his 3 pit bulls back from his mistress. And finally, after a bunch of asking, she hands him the dogs in an urn. He committed suicide 2 days later. And then I was on her divorce hearing. About a month later. Where her husband was trying to divorce her on the grounds of cheating. She had the gall to say that she never had a side boy. When I was on her hearing 2 weeks ago. I went to court for a traffic ticket in the state of Mississippi. I was working a project out there. What I found weird is the judges ruling on 2 different cases. First was a woman who wrecked her car. Had a child not in a baby car seat. DUI. And possession of a controlled substance. He gave her a year probation. No jail time. Next was a lady whose son had been skipping school and missed X amount of days. Something like 34 days. He put the mother in cuffs right then and there and ordered her to spend the same amount of days in jail that she had allowed her son to miss school. I didn't say anything, but I'm pretty sure the look on my face was WTF. In rehab I saw a wealthy woman in her 50s that was on her 50 WI and had not gone to prison yet. Just had very good, expensive lawyers. Most of the people that end up in jail for DWI are poor people with public defenders. Or 3-4 or more DWIs in a short period. I went on a field trip to the courthouse and 2 cases were scheduled that day. The first one was assault and the guy said he didn't whip the ball at his head, he only threw it. I'm a lawyer considering whether to someday be a judge. The DLD Obama was the oddest case I've worked on so far. Boyfriend gets dumped in spring. Stalks ex-girlfriend for 9 months. He's known to have an obsessive interest in bombs and explosives. And is a significant meth head. In December. He delivers a package to ex-girlfriend. There's no return address. But it says Merry Christmas bitch. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out who sent it. Ex calls the cops. Who call the bomb squad? Who opened the package? Inside is a large vibrator that's been hollowed out and filled with explosives. He apparently assumed that she would eagerly use it and blow herself up. This is how you know that men and women think differently. I think that has little to do with men and women but human and meth head. My dad is a judge and had a case that revolved around bull sperm. Basically someone leased a bull and wasn't supposed to breed it and they bred it anyway and the owner sued for the price of the sperm. I'm not a judge but have to go to court a lot for work. I deal with a lot of weird stuff in life and sometimes I feel like I'm in a dream. That or a simulation as people like to say because there is no way life is so weird. Anyway. This little guy gets up and introduces himself to the judge. While his lawyer is standing by him. And says, "Hi, Your Honor. My name is Precious Love. And this is my lawyer, Counselor Frankenstein," and I just stared at them thinking I had gone crazy. Not a judge but worked in a courthouse for a summer doing probate work. The weirdest case I saw was one where a 60-some-odd years old woman believed herself to be the reincarnation of the Archangel Gabriel. She tried to murder her neighbors by trying to get in through their backdoor dodgy door while naked and armed with a butter knife. I'm just a law student. But I'll relay a case I read and still think about to this day. A woman's family was suing a guy for intentional infliction of emotional distress. What happened is this guy was doing some sort of work at the scene of a car accident where a girl from the aforementioned family had been beheaded. He took a picture of the girl and sent it to his friend, who posted it online. Her family ended up seeing it and sued him. The family ended up losing. Okay, I'm not a judge but years ago I used to process court transcripts. I often would read them because some were really crazy. Especially older ones because times were just different back then. Anyways, there was one dated around 1940. It was a man divorcing his wife. After the divorce was final he sued her for mental distress and anguish because apparently her vagina stunk really bad. And because of it he didn't want to have sex with her and it caused him to feel like less of a man because he wasn't having sex as much as he thought he should. He won the case. Got custody of their child and she was ordered to pay a decent amount of money to him. Also, the judge urged her to go to the doctor and get help for her smelly vagina because until she did, she would likely never find another man or be happy in life. Lol, can you imagine that happening today? Thank God things are changing. That poor lady. I've come to the conclusion that there are no judges on Reddit. That or they have good enough judgment not to blab about it. Not a judge. But I am an attorney now, and should be obvious by my name. Back when I was doing my whole internship shtick, I worked at a mental health courthouse. When I finished my usual routine, I'd be allowed to sit at hearings with the clerk of the court, and I sat in one a particularly odd case where the accused went through an elaborate setup with his ex-GF and her family for a Thanksgiving dinner. Long story short, dude was off his meds. He convinced his ex-GF and family over for Thanksgiving dinner after he had gone off on a tangent on them, which caused the breakup. After Thanksgiving, the dude texts the ex and her family pictures of his penis in all of the food they had eaten the day before. I was like, well, he certainly stuffed that turkey. Not a judge. But have spent an extensive amount of time in court and incarcerated. I was due to be sentenced on my second breaking and entering charge. I was addicted to meth and heroin. I'm now over 3 years sober. A man from the public was getting sentenced before me. He was charged with repeatedly sodomizing his grandson when he would watch him. His grandson, who was in elementary school, in turn went and sodomized a younger kid in the bathroom at recess. Before he was sentenced, the judge asked the probation for their sentencing guidelines, which they responded with no jail time. 5 years probation. I was in disbelief that this was even a consideration. He ended up being sentenced to 5 years in prison for sodomizing his grandson on multiple occasions. I was then sentenced after probation recommended for my second charge ever, stemming from my drug addiction. 4 years with 3 years parole, which I got. It was such a weird contrast in cases. And can't believe a person could even weigh out cases in such a way. Not a judge but grand jury, which is where mainly the police testify for indictment on people they've arrested. No judge, just DA. One officer was in the police station parking lot when a vehicle screeched into the parking lot next to him, and a guy jumped out freaking out about how he had taken all these drugs and was now dying. Left vehicle door open. Lots of drugs in plain sight. And the guy was fine, he just panicked for a minute. Easiest arrest that officer ever had. Also easiest indictment. Not a judge. But at this exact moment there is a hashtag trending in Brazil in support of a woman who was ARP'd after getting drugged in a nightclub. The guy who did it is now being charged with non-willful ARP, because apparently he had no intention of ARPing the victim. His lawyer then proceeded to humiliate the woman during the trial by showing pictures of her that he deemed vulgar, while she begged for respect. Honestly, I just feel like throwing up right now. I am not anything remotely connected to the legal system. I am an upstanding citizen. Does that count? Exclamation point. Less than sign. A British judge was caught pleasuring himself with a vibrating sex toy that wasn't as quiet as he thought in court. During the trial. Asterisk. Case dismissed. Judge dismissed. Barrister. He did seem a bit distracted. Friend is a judge. Weirdest case was a dispute between neighbors wherein two parties accused their female neighbor of being a witch. Case was initially brought up relating to charges of stolen property, criminal damage, burglary and animal abuse. The accused was alleged to have stolen from the neighbor's gardens and outhouses, with the abuse pertaining to the deaths of several livestock, multiple chickens and a goat. Said case was weird overall, particularly when the two parties made claims that the neighbor was casting harm spells on them, danced naked in the moonlight and chanted into the early morning. All charges were proven to be true based on physical and recorded evidence. Edit. I once saw a guy cross-examine a parrot. Not a judge. But just remembered this. I was in traffic court because I was a dumb teenager. The case before me was a guy accused of drunk driving. In all seriousness, told the judge that the reason his car was swerving wasn't due to intoxication but due to him trying to open a beer bottle with his teeth while driving. So at least the judge was in a good mood when it was my turn. Here in Canada, we have a law that states you are not guilty with reasonable doubt. Well, a drunk driver killed 2 people in a major accident and rolled his truck over. The prosecution stated that the driver failed a sobriety test, walking on the line test. The defense argued that he was in shock from the crash and doesn't prove he was drunk. After the crash, he was taken to the hospital and given a blood test for the possible DUI. The prosecution said that the level was way above the legal limit of alcohol. The defense had the nurse who took the blood alcohol test and asked what she used to rub the area to insert the needle. She said she doesn't remember. My father was a judge. A police officer burned her wife and 2 kids alive. He was caught later that day. That was one of the most horrible cases he ever presided over. A little late to the show. And not a judge. But here's my strange court-related incident. I was in court for a dog without a leash citation. And to start things off, the judge quiets the room for briefing. She does her spiel and directly after the bailiff walks from the rear of the courtroom up to the bench, leans in to whisper something and hands her an object. The judge's face turns toward us and asks the bailiff, "Where is he? Please come to the stand." As a gentleman approaches, the sounds of PRN start playing from the phone that the bailiff handed the judge. "You have the audacity to watch PRN in my courtroom while I'm briefing everyone? I can't believe this. This is a first," proclaimed the judge. I don't quite remember what the charges against the PRN watcher were initially, but the judge added 72 hours for contempt of court. Obligatory. But he doesn't know how to use the internet. So I'll answer for him. Hearing had to be done like 4 states away because it was big news in the hometown. Man was not able to speak at his own hearing, pending criminal charges. He literally just had to sit there for 3 days. And there was a surprise witness, which led to about 2 minutes of testimony on the word daddy in a absurd context. Best case I've ever worked. Not a judge. But I have a CJ degree and had a former judge as an instructor. He told us a story of bio twins that were both potential fathers in a paternity case. The paternity was determined by a best 2 of 3/4 flip. Not a judge. But I remember once reading about a guy who was suing his neighbor because his neighbor was a beekeeper and apparently the bees were taking nectar from his flowers. I'm pretty sure one of the qualifications to be a judge is not airing out dirty judge laundry on Reddit, even if it's anonymous. I'm not judge, but I heard this story from a lawyer. 2 girlfriends. They were just 14. One is planning to stay at other for 1 night. At night, guest asks, "Can I sleep in your bed? Can you sleep in ground floor today?" Owner girl accepts and lays to the ground bed. Owner's father comes to his daughter's room, opens the door, blindsided because of the dark, thinks that his girl sleeps in her bed, so guest is on the ground, and arpees his own daughter. No judgimo. Also not me. So this lady made Easter decorations to be displayed on the door of her apartment. The display included Peeps, marshmallow candies shaped like ducklings. In case you're unfamiliar, the apartment complex tried to evict her on the basis that the candy in the display made it unsanitary. So the courts call in a local Peeps expert. A weird, but super rad, dude named Andrew Novick. Every year he hosts a Peep themed barbecue for his community. And apparently the lawyers thought that made him an expert regarding that particular snack. I regret that I don't know the outcome of the case or what Peep specific questions were involved. All I remember is Andrew recounting this story as one of the weirdest experiences of his life. It doesn't sound like a huge claim, but coming from a guy who has been featured in the local art museum for his collection of collections, and who was the lead singer of an 80s punk band obsessed with Bubble Stripes gum, something being his weirdest experience carries some weight. Also, Andrew, if you see this, I miss working with you and listening to your stories. Incoming not a judge. But not a judge. But I once was given the opportunity to show up in another district, about 5 hours of public transport away, to defend and deny a traffic ticket. I was charged with talking on the phone while driving, and I did not agree to that charge, as I was parked, handbrake pulled, but engine on, idling. Pro tip: always turn off your vehicle if parked, especially in a crowded place. I was in a very crowded place. Drop off at a huge festival. My transport expenses would not be covered, and because I was a student I could seek a 50% reduction on the fine. I decided it would not be worth it bickering over some wording that I didn't agree to. Especially because I totally was talking on the phone with the engine running, which I learned by definition counts as driving. Judges of Reddit. I feel compelled to participate here for some odd reason.